There we
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Stubborn Praise. Let us know. I may have to enable the chat. No, it's there. Let us know in the chat where you're coming from, what the weather's doing, how you're doing, all of that. We love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm Rita and Grant and Ginny and Denise, Christopher and
Christopher.
Kathy. Nice to see. Oh, wow. Look at them all coming in now.
Yeah,
Hot in Oakland.
it's hot in Vermont too. Probably not as hot as Oakland, but
It feels hot here and it's probably not as hot as it is there. Welcome, everybody.
yeah, so glad to have you with us.
We'll give a moment for everyone to come in.
I did an event with the Poetry Pharmacy in the UK a couple months ago, and she was amazed to see the people from all over the States. It sounded so exotic. The organizer was, oh, from Alaska. Wow. It just seems so amazing to her. I love the excitement from that. Yes, welcome to our friends from Shell Beach, where we just were a few months ago together.
Oh, and where we just were in Sebastopol too.
That's
Well,
right.
welcome, friends. Welcome to Stubborn Praise, which James and I have been doing, well, for like 5 years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
how about that?
That's pretty amazing. It's probably almost like a 5-year anniversary at this point.
I think we might be close. And why stubborn praise? Because despite all the things, the fear and the frustration and the indignance and the all of it, still opportunities to fall in love with the world and praise what is here. That was how our name began. And tonight, as always, James came up with a fabulous theme for us. He says, well, this time I'm thinking about the sacred pause.
Yeah. As usual, it feels very ambitious now. Although, I mean, I think when I'm looking at my work and, deciding what to read tonight, I'm thinking this is all about pausing. Poetry, I think at its heart really is about slowing down and pausing, taking a moment to really take in the world so that we can welcome everything, so that we can fall in love with the world again. Um, yeah, so I think it's apparent that that's what my work is about, but I think in this moment I was also going to say, I'm feeling really tired today, and so if you're feeling tired, angry, annoyed, joyful, stressed, fearful, angry again. Where you come as you are, we hear you, we see you, we welcome you anyway. We show up exactly as we are. And I always feel like when I enter this space with Rosemary, that the rest of the world falls away. And of course, with all of you too, that we co-create this space together. And it is a time outside of time for all of us to gather and just share in a sacred conversation. So, to that end, if you have comments, certainly the chat is great. But if you have specific questions for us, we'll get to those probably usually toward the end of things tonight. And so just put those in the Q&A and we'll tap those whenever we have a little slowdown toward the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you haven't been to one of these before, the format is really we're going to have a conversation and just see where it goes. Our theme tonight is the sacred pause, and James and I will read poems and we'll talk about the practice of writing poems and about showing up. And we'll talk about it all in context of what we're experiencing in our lives right now, what we're experiencing in the world, and opening it up to questions toward the end. And we're planning to go for about an hour and a half, so we'll end on the hour in an hour and a half, just so you know where we're headed. Yes, so interesting. Of course, I do think, James, that that pause is at the heart of our practice. And actually, I really love that you just brought in this whole kind of beautiful invitational welcome that anything that you're experiencing right now, show up with that. I feel like I've been really getting deep, deep lessons in that lately in my own life,
Mm,
again and again, as if, I mean, as if we aren't always, but I've been able to bring more attention and awareness to that about how specifically writing a poem is very similar to the invitation that you just gave to everybody. Like, no matter what you're bringing, no
mhm,
matter what you are bringing, that a blank page has sufficient space for you to bring anything. There is not anything that you can't bring. There may be things you don't want to bring, but and the blank page has space for that too, for your
mm,
unwillingness. Even that is welcome. Even that is a
mm,
possibility. And then the witnessing that happens when we're in that space and we're like, oh yeah, but not that. And then
right.
that beautiful invitation to see, oh, this is what I this is what I want to say no to. This is the place I want to hide. This
Mm,
is this is where I'd rather not show up. And
yeah.
knowing that that's possible. Okay, not now. Not now.
Mm. Don't you feel like there are so many levels or, I don't know, hurdles that you even have to clear to get to writing a poem? Sometimes it's like, you have to clear the hurdle even of just like, it's okay to write a poem, like that's a hurdle in and of itself sometimes to like to show up completely enough to just write something down and be with it until you feel like it's finished. And then when you're in the midst of it, to say that continual yes to what wants to show up, but what you might want to censor, to what wants to be let in, to what surprises you that you had no idea was going to appear on the page, to say yes to that. And, maybe even to say no sometimes to things that would not be appropriate or that, come out of left field, but to just have a sense of welcome for all of it. And, it just seems like, wow, it's amazing that any of us can sit down and write a poem. And so I just want to honor that. Maybe that's just where I am. Like, it's
Sorry.
enough just to honor that. Um, and I also wanted to say that it just feels like sometimes it's not my unwillingness that gets in the way. It's that I think, oh, this is not allowed, or this is too much. And I know you have a poem about this, right?
Yeah.
The idea of being too much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's a real fear of showing up and knowing that whatever I have to say or share, whatever, it's showing up for me. And I'm like, oh, that feels big. And then I think, is anyone else going to be able to handle that?
Mm,
Um, yeah. I wasn't going to read that, but maybe I should. If you talk for just for
yeah.
a second, I'll find that poem.
Okay. Yeah, this was one I just remember. Of course, I had read it in your book first, but then we did an event together out in California at the library in Santa Barbara, and you read this, and I felt like, oh, I got it. You know how sometimes when the poet reads their own work, it's like, oh, that really landed with me.
Yeah.
And I remember sharing it with my husband Brad, and just like that was a really powerful poem.
No, I think so. Actually, this poem I just wrote it actually kind of recently. It was only, well, it was April 23rd. Um,
Wow.
and it came because I was doing a program, a podcast with someone, And after the podcast was over, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how much I just shared. So let's be clear too. There are really two practices here. One is showing up to a blank page or to a blank moment,
Mm.
which is, I think, the showing up to a blank page is really just a practice for showing up to a blank moment. And then, and then the other practice is sharing it with someone else. And that sharing, I think, is maybe a separate practice, a separate kind of practice.
Yeah.
So one of them, I mean, it's enough just to face yourself on a page, but then to put it into the world is you know, every
Another level.
it's another level. And every now and then I'm like, you shared what, Rosemary? You put what out last night to 10,000 people? What were you thinking?
Mm.
But so in this interview, I had just been talking about some of the things that had been experiencing, and I thought, oh my gosh, people are not going to be able to follow me there. That was way too much for most people. And then the story I had, I am way too much. And then I was
Mm.
talking with my beautiful friend Kayleen Asbo, and I had asked her about some story that she was telling herself, and she's like, well, what story are you telling yourself today? And I was like, oh,
Mm.
that I'm too much. And that's where this poem came out of.
Mm.
What I heard her say, it's true. You are too much for some, especially those who have not yet learned they carry the sea inside them, especially those who still want to fit their lives into small, dry boxes with tight fitting tops. But there will be some who desperately need you to show up every bit as immense as you are, not one drop smaller. Need you to be unashamedly vast and deep and full of strange things neither you nor they can understand. Maybe it's just one person who needs you to be that big. Maybe that person is you. That last line was the total epiphany of that poem for me, right? I had
Yeah.
no idea. I had felt maybe like, okay, I could put myself in service to other people. But when I got to the end of the poem and realized, right, what is this sacred pause? It's the chance to see what's really here and what else is really here. I mean, maybe it's true that you're putting yourself out for other people, but I feel like no one more important than yourself.
Mm.
The crazy thought that we need to tend to this sacred vessel, that the reason to show up as ourselves is because we do so much damage to ourselves when we don't.
Mhm.
And the fear, then I understand, of course, we're afraid to show up as ourselves sometimes. Maybe we really are too big for other people. We really do push their buttons. And still, what's at stake if we don't?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think that poem really raised the stakes with that last line, especially because, we are more accustomed to thinking like, okay, well, maybe there is just that one person out there who really needs to hear this, whose life will literally be saved by reading this poem or hearing this story or whatever it happens to be. Um, but I think, to say, what if that person is you? And that's enough.
What
You
if
know,
that's enough? Just
and what
that.
if it doesn't go beyond this sacred vessel, as you said? And that's the vessel that we're polishing through the poetry and the stories and the things that we're sharing. And I think, that can be a hard pill to swallow sometimes because we want to be of service. We want to change the world for the better with our art. And I think we can change the world through becoming the polished vessel, however we might interpret that. I'm not saying perfect, but for sure more clear, more true, more able to hold things when they arise. And, just also from a craft point of view with that poem, the way you open the door at the end and say, that one person who's going to be affected by this, but then it's like You go in and you open another door. What if that person is you? And so, I think that inspires me when I'm writing a poem to say, okay, like you could have ended with the one person being touched by your so-called too muchness. And that would have been like, oh yes, that's solid. But you take it one step farther by calling it to the self and opening this different door. And it just makes me like, yes, I want to be available to that kind of turn that can happen in a poem because it surprises you, it surprises us. And it surprised me again, even though I knew what was coming. It was like, oh, yes, yes. It's like you're startled into the epiphany, as you called it in the
Yeah.
poem.
Boy, I think about this so much, friend, about how this is we're getting into my new favorite thing to think about with writing, which is this. I've been thinking a lot about how not just write the next true thing, which has been such helpful for me, so helpful for me just to write a poem. What's the next true thing? What's the next true thing? But beyond that, to really trust not just the blank page, but to trust poetry itself, to trust the poem, the
Mm,
form of the poem, to trust design. And I
mm,
guess by that, what I'm trying to say is this, that I can come to a blank page and I can write a lot of things that are true. But to write past what I know, to let the poem know more than I do, to write into the epiphany, to write into what I couldn't have possibly known, then that poetry itself has all of these different, we could call them tools, that help me to go into that place I didn't understand. And they look like rhyme and rhythm and repetition and specific detail and tension. And these are all the things that we know that poems love. And I found myself now that when I go in and I trust that after I've gotten into the poem, if I really trust, okay, this is where I'm at, what else is here? What else would the poem want, right? Would the poem
mm,
want repetition? And if it did, where else would that repetition lead me? Does the poem, I know how much poems want opposition because life is full of opposition. The poem just
mhm.
wants to be like life. So I'm like, I trust that the poem is going to tell me, give me more opposition, or not, that's enough, you got enough. But the more I trust poetry and the design of it, the I'm thinking of Robert Frost's poem Design, how could that design govern a thing so small? But just to trust not just the blank page, but the art, to trust the art
Mhm.
of it to guide me past
Yeah.
my own knowingness into unknown places. That's exciting, James. I'm like all like great. Maybe this sounds so obvious, but for me, there's so much aliveness in it right now,
Mhm.
for how not just to truly, truly trust poems to help me think into what comes next. So, for instance, maybe it's just one person who needs you to be that big. And then that little repetition, maybe, right, is what took me into that last line. Maybe that person is you. Oh,
Mm,
and that little twist, the other, the self, and just to know, oh, how yummy that felt, and
yeah.
how I could trust it in that, what else does this poem want? And to let the poem, through repetition, through opposition, take me to that next place.
Mm. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think it's very exciting. It's not obvious at all. And, we do often talk about trust. I think that is a very deep practice for both of us. And I would say that, when I'm working at my best is when I'm in this flow and where I really am letting the poem move forward without getting in the way of it. And it's hard to put that into words because it's a mysterious thing. It's sort of, where does prayer come from? Where does poetry come from? These are the great mysteries. But to just trust in the mystery, I think about what you just said earlier about how meeting the blank page is practice for life, for meeting a blank moment. And when we can meet a blank page with total trust in the container that is poetry. And in a way, whether we're reading poetry or writing poetry, just trusting, like, where's this poem going to take us? I don't want to go somewhere predictable, quite frankly. And I want to be unsettled, but there are also these agreements, like it has to let me in, it has to keep that door open. Um, and go with me with this, but the image that came to me as you were speaking is from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And it's, I don't know if they're in the Temple of Doom exactly, but let's say they are. And so, they reach this chasm and it's like there's no way to cross. I don't know how we're going to cross. And I think it's Indiana Jones or his father. I can't remember which one, but one of them kind of puts two and two together and tosses some pebbles out across the chasm. And you realize it's this optical illusion that makes you think you can't cross. You have to trust that you can cross, even though it feels like this big leap, even though it feels really dangerous, I think, sometimes to let just poetry itself take over. And this voice that isn't you or your voice, that is this other person from what's the name of the too much poem as I'm calling it now?
What I heard her say.
What I heard her say. Yeah. So, just trusting in the guidance and companionship of that other person who is you and who is also not you
Coming
at
through
the same
whatever it is
time.
that lives through
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love where you just took us. I totally followed you all the way there
Oh,
into
good.
Indiana Jones land. Yeah, for sure. Yes. Yes. Okay, so just taking that trust, I love the way you think about it. And this is so often the case, and you probably know this too, right? That there is that sweet flow space that we're in. And often, then writing the poem, it is like getting to the edge of the cliff and you don't trust that you can get to the end. This happens to
Mm,
me constantly. I don't know about anybody else here who's joining us, but I feel like getting into a poem, not so hard. And as Billy Collins says, then you spend the rest of the 90% of the time trying to get out of the poem, right? Like, how do I get
mm,
out of here?
right.
And so this piece of staying with it, throwing the pebbles across the poem, like how trusting that something will show up. And perhaps this is part of where that sacred pause comes in, James. Because for me, that doesn't happen by continuing to write more.
Yeah.
For me, that really happens where it might look like the flow stopped.
Yeah.
It might even feel like the flow stopped. And I think I used to think that was a problem. And now I'm like, oh, no, no, no. That's just part of it. That's just part of it, that it just stops. Like it does feel like, oh, I'm at the cliff, nowhere to go now. That's just part of it. And then you just hang out at the edge of that cliff for a nice long time, however long it takes.
Yeah.
Sometimes a really long time.
Yeah.
Get up and
It's
make dinner in the meantime.
and make dinner on the other side of the cliff. Yeah. I'm reflecting on the fact that it's so funny the things that we think are problems, the more we practice. And I think this is true of life, spiritual practice, writing and creative practice, that then you realize they're just part of the whole shebang. They're meshed with the whole process. And that actually they're not problems. They're just things to be sitting with, things to, I mean, that, like you're saying, that sacred pause might lead you more deeply into a poem, might lead you around a corner you never would have thought to turn before without just pausing and letting it be instead of doing what I used to do, which is to keep writing until the poem has lost all of its energy, basically.
Right,
And
right.
it's just like mushy oatmeal on the page. And you're like, oh, this is not very exciting anymore. I mean, I love oatmeal, don't get me wrong, but
I love oatmeal. Wait, sorry, oatmeal. But yeah,
yeah,
nobody wants an oatmeal-ish poem. That was a really good way to describe what happens sometimes when we overwrite,
yeah,
till the energy dissipates.
Yeah, and I think over revising is a similar process. Even if you leave it for a while and you go back, I think, I won't speak for other people, but I know for me, I often thought if I wasn't, you know, being like this clockmaker and taking every little piece apart and putting it all back together in this brand new form, that wasn't true revision. And it's like, I think the process is much gentler now. It is like tossing those pebbles across. I'm like, okay, where do I go now? And I think it's also the other kind of thing I was thinking about as you were talking earlier was how for me, oftentimes I'm just sitting with the piece and then like pausing, reading something else, going to make a cup of tea, and then coming back and like sometimes even just switching the notebook I'm writing it in or switching the mode in which I'm writing it helps. But really, I notice like the poem, it's almost like a game of Tetris or something. It starts moving around and you're like, oh, that doesn't want to be there. That wants to be here. And so if you just allow that to happen, allow that to unfold, then it's almost like the poem can rewrite itself.
Yes.
And you're just like gently, almost like it's on a screen, like you're just moving the pieces
Yeah.
little by little. Maybe the gentleness is what works for me. I just need it to be gentle and not like you must take every little piece apart um, in order for me to feel like I'm more connected with the process.
Mhm. Yeah. James, I want to hear you read a poem.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Well, I was trying to think of one that has maybe gone through some of these processes that we're talking about. Um, I'll read this one because it is so connected to real life. Like this really happened. I mean, I would say that for most of my poems, but I felt like I was the transcriber for this poem. And this one is called So Much Space for Song.
Hmm.
Maybe have I read this before? I can't remember.
I don't know, but I do know this one and love it. So,
Oh, thank you. So much space for song. What made the winter wren say, "This is my home now," as it carried stick after stick and tufts of grass to the tractor, shaping a soft place inside the arm that lifts the bucket? What gave such a small body so much space for song, belting out notes from its perch on top of the seat, chirping if we get too close to that hollow where her young are now hatching, calling out in hunger? What fills any of us with care enough to say yes to this difficult world, taking our places in it despite the risks, knowing the dangers? Watch how the wren shrinks itself to fit inside the tractor we haven't driven in weeks, where tiny beings have just emerged from eggs the size of marbles, each one filled with the songs of their mother and father, a music that's larger than this one life we are given.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm wondering, I'm just, listening to it again. Uh, and I know I've read it before on a page, and some things that I'm drawn to, and just thinking about the conversation that we're having and how it evolves, right? I'm just thinking about that series of questions that you ask in the beginning and how just letting yourself enter into that inquiry. What is it? Why is this? How is that? Letting the whole thing begin in wonder,
Mm,
uh, and then end in invitation, right? Watch this, listen to this.
mm.
Um, what do you remember about writing that poem?
I do remember that asking those questions felt like stepping into uncertainty and stepping into like, oh, am I allowed to do this? I mean, this is what's coming through me right now. And these are the questions like, how can this tiny little winter wren, I mean, they're so small and their songs are so big. How can that be? Um, I think there's a way in which I think about myself and my desire to share my work with the world, and how sometimes you feel like this small humble container, and yet these things bubble forth, they come out, they want to be shared. And so writing into those questions, I think, was really difficult and was a risk. And it was one of those poems where I was uncertain after writing it. Like, I'm not sure if this is going to land or if people are going to appreciate it. I think there was probably what I call a vulnerability hangover afterwards. It just felt like, stepping out. And then I remember thinking at the end, I was really surprised by that idea that these little nestlings are each filled with the songs of their
Their
mother
mother
and
and
father.
father. Yeah.
Yeah, like where did that come from? That wasn't me. That wasn't my thinking mind. Um, and it makes me a little emotional when I read it because we are all filled with those songs, whether we want them or not, or love them or not, or, we sort of have to make peace with what we're given from our mother and father. And, the winter wrens are lucky because they've been given this ability to sing beautifully and loudly and bigly. But yeah, those are some of the things that came up.
Hmm. Well, and I think too, the way that the poem lands, right? You begin it with they've been given these songs of their mother and father, but then you take it out into that what's greater than us, right? This song that's so beyond us, which it seems to me is what you've been talking about, what I think about all the time is this, what is it that's greater than us that's coming through us, right? That's the same thing. That's what we're trusting when we say we trust the blank page, we trust the the poem, the form of the poem, and even to say that we trust, I think, really what is coming through us, which maybe brings me to that this whole point of the sacred pause. And so I've been thinking a lot about this word sacred lately.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, what does that even really mean? What does that even mean to me, sacred? I like it. I like the way it sounds. It has some like I have some resonance with it, but I was like, what is it? And was thinking about it. So of course I looked it up. um, and so from Latin, meaning holy and consecrated and dedicated to God. But before that, from the Proto-Indo-European root, it has this sense of something that's part of a ceremony or a ritual, something that is apart, setting something apart and regarding it with deep respect and reverence.
Hmm.
And I thought, that's it right there. That piece of setting it apart, creating this time for me, very much writing as a ritual, right? Every day, I know you too. We
Hmm.
sit down, we write, we meet the blank page, we bring what we know of poems from reading them and talking about them and loving them and writing them. And then we show up with this ritual of writing with such deep respect, with such reverence for the practice itself and for the world that we
Hmm.
inhabit, right? What is it, this mystery that is this thing this mystery of what's larger than their song,
Yeah.
what's larger than us? What is it that's coming through? How did you know? What part of, what mystery, what greater than you came through and said the songs of their mother and father,
Right.
when that isn't something that James Cruz could have thought to say, right? So in this way, I was like, yeah, that's it then. That really is, that feels so true to say that it is
Yeah.
sacred, this practice of pausing and wondering what's here, what's here, and to do it through writing.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I said it feels so ambitious, that idea that a pause is not enough, that it must also be sacred. But I love that you, of course, the person who studied linguistics, I can always count on Rosemary to break out the Oxford English Dictionary and look things up. That you find out it's this ritualistic, ceremonial aspect of it. And so I feel almost like the word sacred and pause are somehow related and intertwined because I'm just thinking, even for someone like me who moves pretty slowly through the world, like Rosemary knows this about me and other folks, but like it's still like the idea of just pausing for no reason other than like making it a ritual or making a little ceremony for yourself to just notice something or be with something feels like such a relief to me. And it feels like such a rarity as well that we don't often do that. And I think that is in part why I'm so drawn to writing and to poetry because it is this deeper pause and this deeper check-in that allows me almost to do a catalog of, okay, so what happened, in the last 24 hours that bears remembering? What wants to be remembered usually is really the thrust of the
Such a
question.
beautiful question. What wants to be remembered?
Mhm.
Not what do I want to remember, but what
Right.
wants to be remembered.
Yeah. And oftentimes, I mean, I think you and I, as we usually say during every session, you're writing late at night, I'm writing early in the morning slash late at night for you. And so we're writing at these similar times when maybe, the defenses are down a little bit, when we are possibly more open, when the veils are thinner. And so I think sometimes it's not even a conscious question. It's just the poem will teach me or show me what wanted to be remembered. And it's like,
Exactly.
oh, that really that. I noticed that. I was there for that. Sometimes it's a surprise.
Even more so, you're so right. Even, and it's in that reflection that we understand how much it has to offer us, not necessarily in the moment itself. Yeah.
Right.
So I thought I'd read a poem about how hard it can be to stop and pause sometimes. Like I have plenty of poems about the joy of pausing, but this is one about just how hard, just how hard it can be to get there sometimes.
Mm.
So it's called Returning to Stillness. And I want to say that as I recall, I wrote this poem the day after I had written a poem about just how beautiful the pause was and how easy it was to just fall into the world. It was all so lovely and yummy and luscious and still and pausey and sacred. And then, and then the next day,
Hmm.
that was impossible. So that's what this is about. It's called Returning to Stillness. I can't unnotice this fist that has grabbed my chest and squeezes it hard, this prickly balloon that seems to have blown itself up in my belly. To be still today is to notice that so much inside me is writhing, squirming, thrashing. Hello, discomfort. Hello, agitation. Hello, wishing that stillness could be more still. Eyes closed, I watch myself as I sit in the middle of the empty room, sunlight stretching across the floor in bright and angled shapes. I zoom out and see the whole house. Zoom out farther and see the yard, the trees. I zoom out until I see our small town and then a blur of green and brown and the familiar blue and green curve of the earth as it spins and orbits. The earth is anything but still. And yet such spaciousness surrounds it. Oh, sweet woman, sitting still in your room with your hand on your heart and a world of thrust and upheaval spinning inside you. Right now, it's like this. You are being moved. You're still. It's like this.
Mm, mm. I love
Yeah.
that. It's like this.
I mean, what a gorgeous, from Buddhism, right? This, it's like this. It's like
Yeah.
this. And the longing to be still. And when it isn't still and feeling like here it is, we talked about this earlier. Is it a problem? Is it a problem that I can't
Mm,
feel like I'm still? Or is it just how it is? It's just how it is. In this moment, impossible to feel like I'm capable of a sacred pause. I remember writing the poem thinking, not even possible, not even possible. Although, then the paradox, right, of how the earth feels so still and yet it's spinning, how it's spinning, but it's surrounded by this spaciousness.
mhm.
How the woman me, sitting in the middle of the room, looks still and yet inside this, like, yeah, yeah. And then just to say, oh, hello to all of it, right? Oh, this is what it's like now. This is how it is.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is how it is. And the helpfulness for me too, I think about this a lot, about how poetry allows us to have a lens that we get to choose how
Mm,
tight in we're going to go, right? Am I just going to see the woman in the room?
yeah.
Or am I going to, oh, look, there's the whole house. Oh, look, there's the whole, earth, right? Like just how
Mhm.
far out can I go? And that playing with perspective can be so, what's the word? Instructive? I don't think that feels so sterile somehow for what I want to say.
My word would be illuminating. I don't
I
know.
like that.
It's illuminating to me. And I feel like it is also part of a lot of spiritual practice, a lot of traditions. I mean, I've practiced more meditation, and I feel like I've been in guided meditations where they're like, zoom out, zoom out until you have this larger view. And I feel like, in the last two poems, we're talking a lot about space and spaciousness. And it seems to me that that is a big part of writing practice, of course, but I think also inviting those sacred pauses into our lives, even if we just leave like 1 inch or, you know, 1 millimeter of space for people to touch us, teach us,
Yeah.
then that's something. Um, yeah. Yeah, I had a meditation teacher also who would always say while we were meditating, this is how it is now. This is how it is now. And I still think about that all the time. And I think about it when I have those days like you're describing in this poem, which I've had a few recently. And it's like you have this amazing day where you feel like you're on top of the world, everything seems possible. And then it's almost like the universe is just like, well, you need to be humbled too. And
And
so it
you
gives
need
you
to
the
be humbled.
opposite of that.
Which, so I just did an interview yesterday. It'll come out on Emerging Form in a couple days. And it was with Shelley Reed, who wrote a beautiful book called Go as a River,
Hmm.
which it's her first novel. And it has sold over 1 million copies worldwide. She just did a book tour. She's been like, I forget, it's an enormous number, like 11 countries and 40 states. Those are the wrong numbers, but they're like that, right? And her first, it translated into 34 languages. That is the right number. So she's just like this kind of crazy success. And in our conversation, what was so beautiful to me, James, was a couple of things. One, her earnestness, like just how much she wanted to speak what was really happening, speak the truth, both in the interview, but I also really got that sense in reading that book. And it's a novel. And the other thing that I loved so much was that, obviously emerging form, we're talking about practice, creative process. And she just kept saying, we'd ask her a question, she'd say, I don't know. I'm still
Mm,
discovering what my process is. I'm still discovering what this is like. And there was so much humility in what she was saying. This is what made me think of it out of what you were saying. there was so much humility in it and so much curiosity. And I just wanted to note to self, can you stay that interested in process? Can you stay that
Mm,
curious about what you think you know about how to do something?
right.
Can you continue to bring that newness, freshness, aliveness to your process every time you sit down?
Mm. Yeah, and I would think that someone who has had such amazing success early on would need to stay very curious and flexible about what the process is, because if you think your process is just trying to do the same book again and again or trying to achieve the same level of success, then, that's just boring. That's not very interesting. And, you're probably going to be disappointed because it's different every time, as we know. And yeah, so that is a great reminder, actually, to be humble and to see it even as a process, as we say of ourselves that we are in process all the time.
All the time. I'm
Yeah.
thinking too about how these stories that I've told myself about, oh, well, it'll be easier when, or it'll, and or I'll know that I'm doing it right when, or like these stories that I have had about what it will be like when I arrive somewhere
Hmm.
in my practice. And I just keep laughing at myself about this myth of arriving, right? Are you
Hmm.
kidding? And how anytime I feel like there's an arrival of any kind, no. Like actually, now the next door, now the next path, now the next invitation.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I have a poem that speaks to that. I may have read this before. I'm forgetting, but we'll repeat.
We'll hear it brand new, James.
That's right. Um, and as usual, this is not one that I was planning to read, but so people who are in my community who know me know that I talk a lot about the little blue post-it that's on my door here. And so that makes a cameo in this poem. And this is called You Are Here. I don't think we do enough bowing to the simple things, the humble acts, like sweeping dust and hair from the stairs or wiping down the windows so I have a clear view of that slim crimson strip of the red-winged blackbird. First sign of spring, I could kneel and kiss. I bow to the box of my mother's ashes, the way grief stays evergreen, yet still changes, losing its needles and shedding limbs, bending in wind I thought would destroy me. I bow to the blue post-it note stuck to my office door, which says, You have already arrived. You are here. The words slowing the locomotive of my runaway heart and mind each time I read them.
Um,
So, yeah, that idea that there's somewhere else to get, which I think is sort of, I don't want to say poisonous, but in a way it is poisonous to the freedom and openness of the creative process. If you're pushing, if, I wrote that note to myself because I realized that I had this posture with creativity for a while where I was just like hunched over, pushing forward, like there was somewhere to get. And it's like, but I'm already here. I'm doing what I want to do every day. And yes, we might always want for this or that to happen, but for the most part, I get to do what I love. I get to share it with people. I get to do things like this with you, Rosemary, and everyone who's with us. And I've arrived. I'm here. And I think I've arrived by virtue of just saying, I'm here and feeling what that's really like.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
And in that poem, just how beautiful the bowing to everything that's there, right? To the things that we could hardly imagine we're going to bow to, sweeping the stairs, right? That's what we're going to just and so that feels to me so in keeping with the theme of stubborn praise, right?
Mhm.
You could be angry, I have to sweep the stairs again. You can be angry and honoring. "Ah, I have to sweep the stairs again.
True.
Oh, look at this. I'm going to bow to this moment of how I get to do this. That this is a possibility, that I have a stair, that I have a broom, that I have a body that can sweep, that I have, that I just think that there is this, that this is a part of a rhythm of what makes a life. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that invitation to bow to what could we not bow to? And I think this is part of what poetry does, is that anything, even apparently ticks, which I finally did write a poem about
Yes.
ticks, right? Even ticks, we can find our way into honoring. And I do feel like that's part of that sacredness, right? That when we bring this deep respect to everything, gosh, it's hard to say that because there are so many things that I can already feel rising up in me, like, yeah, but what about? Yeah, but what about? What up? What about? Especially with people,
Yeah.
especially with people who think very differently than I do. And I can get really upset and um, shattered and angry and all these things. But how does a poem invite us into a space where we are capable of honoring the things that we never thought we would be capable of honoring?
Mm. Yeah. And I think honoring is so different than, inviting someone toxic into your life or even over for dinner. Like I would love to be spiritually mature enough to just have dinner with anyone in the world, but I just know that that's not the case. That's just not the
I'll
case.
spit out my teeth.
I mean, honestly, I thought today, like, oh, I might be in a situation where this person invites me to dinner and like I just don't like how I feel around her. And so I don't think I'm gonna go. And just like, so I'm not there yet. I would like to be there. But I think it's still like I honor and respect this person, absolutely. And so, we can honor and respect those things that feel really hard or feel really impossible. And I think, I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm not like bowing down every time I'm sweeping the stairs, but there's an internal posture of bowing. And I think that is the pause. It's like I respect the fact that I get to do this. I'm well enough and healthy enough and alive enough to be able to do this, to sweep the stairs. And I like how they look afterwards. So
And I
there's
like
there's something there too.
somebody just put in the chat bar that I should read this poem about the bell ringing while I'm driving and hating on people, which is totally apropos of this conversation. And I'm not sure I can find it, but I'm going to try real quick.
Okay.
Why is that's so funny? My computer just totally froze up. Let's
Oops.
see. What if I try the word drive?
Yeah,
Mm.
Rosemary's lucky because she posts these poems so she can, and I've actually done this to find Rosemary's poems before. I just like search for a word on her blog. Like, I need a poem about joy.
Oh yeah, here I found it. It's called the Mindfulness Bell.
Mm,
Okay, this is from May, I guess, and it is definitely along these lines. And it's inspired by a beautiful poet, David Keplinger, who has a gorgeous book, Ice, and he also has a nice meditation program that you can look up. If you just search up David Keplinger, you'll find he has some beautiful offerings online. But this came out of something he was writing. You might consider your own minor annoyances and turn one into a bell. Let it be a bell to remind you to come back and remember soon all of this will be gone. Thank you, Beth, for suggesting this poem because I had not remembered it. This is called The Mindfulness Bell. And so today, when the very slow driver in front of me starts going 10 miles over the speed limit right when we get to the passing lane, I imagine my frustration is a bell. Instead of calling him an idiot as usual, instead I think, ding, can you be grateful to be alive right now? Ding. Can you bless this body, delight in this canyon, find joy in the burgeoning green of spring? Ding, ding, ding. Can you come home to this moment and realize all belongs, even slow drivers who speed up, even your impatience? Ding. Here is your chance to imagine whatever provokes you becomes a mindfulness bell. There will come a time when you think, oh, what a lucky woman you were to drive these roads at all. Could that time be now? Ding, ding. Oh, that idiot. Ding. Please let him pull over. Don't honk. Please. Ding, ding, ding. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that poem. Yeah, I driving seems to be my real practice.
Mm,
I yeah, I think driving probably teaches me as much, maybe more than writing poems because
yeah.
I live on a windy river road, a two-lane highway, and boy, I really get to meet all the things that all the places where I lose it. I think.
Well, it's hard because, those people that we were just talking about who are maybe difficult and enraging in real life are now in control of huge, dangerous machines. And so, how can we not get a little worked up about that sometimes? Ding. Um,
Yeah, I like Barbara Ball says that she shared this poem with friends and now they ding all day long.
mhm. Some days have a lot of dings in them.
Some days, lots of dings. Well, friend, I think you should read another poem and then we should open it up to a little conversation. So I'm just going to remind you, friends, that if you do have a question, we aren't going to necessarily have seen it come through in the chat bar. So this is why we invite you to put it into the Q&A tab, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And so if you do have something that you wish that we would talk about or address, go ahead and put it in there now. And do you have something else you'd like to read, James?
Sure. Yeah. I'll read this poem because it just popped up. It seems apropos, and also there are a few folks here who were with us at the retreat that we led in San Luis Obispo, where this poem came up. I think we even did an exercise to it, and now Rosemerry has a poem of the same title too. So this poem is called Mud Puddling. I just want to love my life as it is, the cobwebbed corners and rumpled bed, my sweaty yoga mat still unrolled across the floor, the color rubbed off where I rest my head each morning. Let me love the orderly and the messy, my unwashed and salt stained car, the cracked planter left out in the cold, this regret that still fills me years after my mother's passing because I wasn't there at her bedside when she died, because I didn't do more to save her. Let me be like the butterflies, sipping from wet soil, dung and carrion, drawing nutrients from actual blood, sweat, and tears, what we call mud puddling. Let me stay in love with my sorrow today, with anger, fatigue, and every fruit fly rising up from the sweet and rotting compost I forgot to take out.
There's something I'm wondering if it's true, and I just want to ask you when you start the poem with wondering if I just want to love my life.
Yeah.
And then you name the places where it might not be easy to name to fall in love. I guess I'm projecting. So you just tell me where I'm wrong. Is it true or is it possible that even in the writing of that invitation that that happens a little bit, that you do fall in love with it a little
Oh
bit?
yeah. Oh yeah. Most definitely. I mean, I think it is why I so often turn toward that, what you and I often discuss, which is, the mix of the grief and the joy, the sorrow and the delight and the anger and the appreciation. Like it all comes of a piece. And it's really hard when you're paying attention to separate out the strands. We want it to be like, oh no, I'm just purely angry. But like you were saying earlier, I could be angry that I have to sweep the stairs again or do the laundry or wash the dishes or whatever. And also, like, I get to do this for me, for my husband. Um, I get to be alive. I get to be doing chores. So I think the writing of it is a way of stepping into that posture of the bowing, like we were talking about earlier. And without the writing, sometimes I think there wouldn't be as much bowing and appreciating because I think it's through the writing that I see, it all comes together. And, you know, it's like I feel so grateful. I live in a beautiful place, but like there are all these messy parts of it too that kind of drive me a little crazy. And it's like, can you love the mess as well? Can you welcome the mess as well? And what is more messy than sorrow, anger, rage? Those are such messy emotions. And like, I don't want them, frankly, but I'm human and we all are. So they're going to be here. And I think, that deeper pause of the poem is a way of inviting us and allowing us to be more human, to step more into our humanness. And it's uncomfortable, messy, funny, silly. Even as I was reading that, I end with the rotting compost I forgot to take out. The truth is, I didn't forget to take it out. I just didn't want to. And I just like leaving it on the counter. And then I forget about it, but like there's some volition there. I don't actually want to do it. Um, and so I'm laughing at myself even as I'm, feeling all the other things that this poem brings up. But I wrote this because, if you and I both sort of dwell in the sort of spiritual self-help-ish world. We're sort of on the edge of that. And I listen to a lot of those things. I read a lot of those things, but I had just gotten to this point where, like I can't listen to another podcast that's trying to tell me how to live my best life. Or, here's the theory that's going to change your life in one book, you know, and this is the practice that's going to save you. It's like, can I just be okay with things as they are? It's kind of great and also not great a lot of times, but that's okay.
Oh, I love all of that. I love all of that. I'm going to bring in some questions that people are asking in the Q&A. I'm ready to ask about a title of a poem and what book it's in, just so everyone knows. James and I will send you all of the poems that we read tonight. We'll along with the recording, we'll be sending all the poems that we shared. Um, None of the poems I read tonight were in a book. They're all just, I guess, too new or not in books. Julie Rome, hi, sweet Julie, says, do you set a time limit for your writing periods? I do not. Mine can be really long. They might last hours, which is why I like doing them late at night because I'm willing to put off going to bed uh, in order to just wait and wait and wait until something happens. But how about you, James?
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I'm usually reading or journaling or something while I'm waiting for something to happen. But it can take hours, and I would say the average usually is a couple of hours for me, first thing in the morning. Um, but I definitely, I mean, I'm lucky not to have to set a time limit, but I do notice that if there is some time limit, sometimes that can kick things into gear and, things can happen more quickly. As long as I'm not resenting the fact that there's a time limit.
Okay, this is a great point because, when I teach, I know when you teach too, we do have time limits. Like there are actually
Mhm.
time limits, and I'm often stunned at just how much can happen in a
Yes.
very short period of time. Also, I'm stunned by how much being in a group, with a class and having some conversation about whatever is that, and then going into writing,
Yeah.
there is never a time I'm not amazed at
Yes.
just how much that group collaborative conversation energy fuels, primes, nourishes whatever it is in me so that when I come to my own writing, it actually feels like a lot more is possible in 15 or 20 or 30 minutes
Mhm.
than if I were just sitting down on my own, and I've been like sweeping the stairs and then sat down for 15 minutes. That's a whole different kind of energy to go into it with. So there is something magical about a time limit in a group that I don't
Mhm.
have by myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a time limit in a group where you've just been having that creative conversation, like you said, and where you feel safe, where, there's not this sort of pressure or like high stakes, like must produce something amazing. In my monthly Zoom community, I know there are a lot of folks here who are in that. I'm consistently amazed. And sometimes we only have 12 minutes and what people are able to come up with in 12 minutes and then are willing to share too afterwards, it's stunning. It really is. And I notice myself too after our sessions with Stubborn Praise or we do things together, Rosemary, the next morning I'm like buzzing, like the pump is very much primed by this kind of sacred, creative conversation because it's a large pause. We're all taking this large pause together to talk about things that probably most of us don't get to talk about in our daily lives, unless we corner spouses or have good friends nearby.
No, it's true. It's true. How often do we get to talk about these things, to be curious about them and really dive into them and wonder about it? Holly says to you both, how has your writing changed after years of writing poems? I love this question so much because it's changed so much and continues to change. It's a non-ending change. And but I would say my first thought is in response to this, and we were talking about this earlier, the trust that comes then that I can sit down, that something will happen, that it doesn't have to be good, that and that I can oh, there was another, and it just, I lost. Oh, the things that anything that happens, including like me just like forgetting what I was about to say, is not a problem. That none of it is a problem. I just really think about how I used to vilify myself or oh, why can't you? Or you should have, or that's not good, or just all, why did you get stuck? Or I'm even thinking about James as how I used to in classes talk a lot more about stuck. Like, what happened when you got stuck? What did you do? Almost as if it was the way I was framing it, as if it were still a problem. Like, how do we get over being
Mhm.
stuck?
Yeah.
Whereas I think part of what's most alive in me now is just being like, oh, yeah, hello, stuck. Not a problem.
Mhm.
It's just what it is. Just right now, stuck. Okay.
Yeah.
Just noticing how little feels like a problem anymore.
Right.
Um, and that feels like maybe the biggest change in my writing practices
Mhm.
that I think I've seen so much, after you've been stuck enough or unstuck enough or it flows enough or you yeah, you just, oh, that's just part of it. That's just part of it. It gets easier and
Mhm.
easier to show up for any of it.
Yeah. And actually, it might turn out to be really generative if you allow it to be, you know. I mean, it's a waiting period, it's a grace period. You know, it doesn't have to be I have writer's block or I'm stuck or, I don't know where to go from here. It's like just wait. I think, what's changed for me is really the gentleness that I'm able to bring to the process. That's a big one. And so it is, like I was saying earlier, just allowing the pieces to move around or being like, oh, I rewrote this without the first line or without the first three lines. Maybe that's what the poem wants. So really allowing the poem as a companion, as an agent to have this freedom to do what it wants to do and to work on me in ways that I'm probably not even aware that the poem is working on me. I think that's one big way. The other thing I want to say too is, I've been lucky enough to work with some really amazing teachers, and one of those was Ted Kuzer. I lived in Nebraska for 5 years and got to work with him on a daily basis for several semesters in those 5 years. And I would sit at my desk, tortured every morning because I wanted to write a poem like Ted Kuzer. I wanted to write a poem that was as good as a Ted Kuzer poem. And it's like, okay, first of all, he's been practicing, let's say, 40 years longer than you have. So there's that. And second of all, you're James Cruz.
Right, you're
He's
never
Ted
going to write a
Kuzer.
Ted Hooser
Never
poem.
gonna happen.
It's never going
Never
to
gonna happen.
happen.
So now, I can admire people's poems. I can love them, champion them, lift them up, create writing exercises from them, and not feel like any, the Buddhists call it shenpa, this like stickiness of like, oh, but I'll never get to do that. I'll never be that. Because I won't. It's true. And that's a thing to celebrate instead of a thing to feel really badly about.
Oh, I love that so much. Yes. Yes. That the going from feeling like uh, in competition with almost even, right? Like
Yep.
how am I ever going to write a poem as good as this other person? To being able to, and I remember I used to have these feelings of, well, why write poems at all when Ellen Bass wrote that poem? And
Hmm.
I just might as well never write another poem, right? Flee Young We wrote from Blossoms, like why should Rosemary Trommer ever write another poem? And just giving up that feeling as opposed to the celebratory, honoring, inclusive, generous, generative feeling of this person wrote this and how, loving it and letting it fuel us or um, yeah, inspire
Hmm.
us
Yeah.
not to
Yeah.
do the same thing,
Right.
not to compete with it,
Mm-mm.
but to join in conversation with it, to play,
Play.
play with
That's
it.
what it is. That's what it is. Yeah. To play and be in conversation with. Yeah, that's the gift, I think, of realizing that no one can write a poem the way you can, the way each person here who writes poems can write. No one can do it. It's true, no one can write like Ted Kuzer, but no one can write like you either.
Let's see. Anonymous attendee says, how does one write about this moment, the truth and terror of hearing about the raid that happened in our city yesterday? Oh, this is gorgeous. Um, because it's so what's up, right? Like, how do we touch what's happening now and the terror? I'm glad you used that word, right? How do we show up and meet what terrifies us most?
Mm.
Um, I have some thoughts, but do you have something you want to say?
Well, I think my heart is inclined in two different directions. One is it's we don't have to write about it right now if we can't or if we don't want to. That we're not lesser or we're not, not doing our job as citizens if we can't write about something because it's too big or too close or too painful, too terrifying. Um, so I feel like I want to give us all that permission because sometimes it takes time to really process. And I mean, that is almost one of the strategies of what's happening in our country right now is there's simply not time to reflect. There's not time to sort of gather because it's just so much happening all at once. So there's that. But I think this goes back to what we were saying earlier about, you know, not feeling like maybe, you might begin a poem about, I'm thinking about our garden outside, about the echinacea flowers and the pollinators that are gathering there and the pleasure of that moment. Or one poem that I did write was the pleasure of picking a bunch of peonies and putting them in my bedroom and then waking up to the scent as I'm waking up fearful, anxious, and worried about what's happening in our country. So I think allowing that to coexist with daily life and, feeling the rub of that and feeling like, yes, of course, that's going to seem really, there's a word I'm looking for that's not coming to me. It's going to seem really incongruent to place, let's say the scent of the peonies and, a president dropping bombs without, illegally on another country. And this is what's happening. This is our reality that we're living in. And so, other people are living in different realities, and it's their job to be true to that. So I think, to just keep those doors open for each of us if we do feel called to write about it, not I should write about this, but I must write about this, or just letting the writing about it happen on its own, allowing your broken heart to speak through you and through that blank page and that blank poem, that blank moment that we're meeting.
Yeah, right. Because I think the truth is you could start writing about anything. You could start writing about peonies. You could start writing about the river. And if what's up is the terror about the raids, that will come out. That's going to come out. And I'm also thinking about one time when I was going through a really difficult time. My mom had just gone to the hospital, her heart, for something with her heart. I was absolutely terrified. And that's the night I wrote a poem about a spatula, right? It had nothing to do at all with my mom because I couldn't. Like, there was no part of
Mm,
me at that moment that was able to turn toward the fear of losing my mom. So I didn't. And
yeah,
knowing that that's okay too, knowing that
yeah,
that's okay too, I did eventually write about that. And I think this is the other thing about having a practice so that if we're writing with any frequency, to know that maybe you don't write about that terror today, but to know that tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day, there's an opportunity
mm,
for that to show up when maybe we have a little bit more capacity to meet that. There is something so powerful, I know, about writing that does allow us to turn toward the thing that terrifies us the most
yeah,
and not pretend it's not happening. We're not
mm,
always capable of that, but I think that at some point, I know the relief in my body when I write about it. And
mm,
I'm like, oh, see, you're not resisting it. You're just letting it in. You're letting yourself write
yeah,
about the thing that terrifies you.
yeah. And to let it happen, I think feels like good advice, even just to give to myself, because I have a similar question sometimes. How do I write about these times? How do I really capture that? And I think one way, this is what I sometimes tell people here in Vermont, almost no one uses their front door because we have mud rooms, where you take off your muddy shoes or your snowy shoes. And so everyone uses the side door. And so I think sometimes you have to come in the side door to a subject that's really difficult, like, the thought of losing your mother, when she was in the hospital. I think you probably, I would say maybe this bachelor poem touches on strands of that or pieces of that. But you still had to go through the side door. Um, and I just noticed that's true for myself that, sitting down and saying, I am going to write a poem that just touches on the terror of these times that we are living through, I think is a lot of pressure to put on yourself in your practice. Poetry can hold it, but I think to command it to hold it, is maybe not the best approach, to just like cultivate that gentleness and
Mm.
that allowing.
And curiosity. I think that's the other
Yes.
part. That's the other part that
Hmm.
is how, gosh, I get into this a lot too. I love this question so much because I too, I mean, the terror of things that are happening in the world, right? The fear that I feel around them, the charge that I feel to like say something about them. And then so then to be able to meet that moment and open to it, less with an agenda of what I think I want to say. And this is where that trust piece comes in. Coming to a blank page, coming with knowing what a poem has to offer us and letting that know more than I do. So coming in this non-agenda way to wonder what's here about what's happening, what's here about the terror, what's here about this actual act of aggression, what's here, and to bring to meet it with wonder as opposed to uh, agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I'm just thinking about what you said about Shelley Reed, the novelist earlier, and that idea of just not knowing and owning the fact that you don't know. Sometimes that's a really great way to begin, is to say, I don't know how to talk about this. I don't know what to do about this. And to just, because that opens you to curiosity,
Yes.
because you have the don't know mind,
Yes.
and the don't know mind is completely open. It's a lot freer, emptier than, having that agenda, like you're saying.
Right. Or bringing in questions. How do I write about that? Just starting with that. How do I write about this?
Yeah.
Thank you, anonymous attendee, for that unbelievably gorgeous question.
Yeah.
Do you find writing joyous or tedious or both? Some writers say do anything else if you can other than write. A.R. Emmons would say that to imply it's a painful process, but this feels wrong to me. Definitely different from the idea of a sacred pause. Curious about your thoughts on this. Do you find writing joyous or tedious or both?
Mm. I think the tedious part is, after the writing. It can be if you're putting a book together and you sort of have to do work that is like marketing work or, things like that. So I don't really consider that part of the writing. That's part of the larger creative process, maybe. I find writing very joyful, very sacred. And my writing practice, I don't know if I would be alive without it. I don't know who I would be without it. And, I find a lot of comfort, and I really do reject that image of the writer as a sort of tortured being, because I think that's a choice. That's a way of framing it. Um, I think writing can be a really playful, joyful process, even sometimes when you are writing about difficult things.
Even then. Yeah, that's the paradox. Thanks, Mary, for that one. Yes, ditto. Ditto to every single thing James just said. Ginny says, when you're writing the beginning of a poem, are you doing so by hand or on a laptop? And then with revising, how about that? What's your choice of instrument? This is probably our last question, friends, even though I see there are quite a few more. Um, how about you, James? I know what you think on this.
Yeah, I always start by hand. I have terrible handwriting, but I love to write by hand. And I write over and over by hand. So sometimes I'll write in a notebook and I'll write it several different times. And then, like I said earlier, I'll switch to a different notebook or a legal pad or something and just, change it up a little bit. And then eventually, sometimes it's hard for me, honestly, to get to that point of typing it up because it feels like it changes so much.
Mhm.
And so, sometimes I'll just let it settle in the notebook for a little while before typing it out.
Yeah. And I'm all on the computer almost all the time. I love writing on a computer. I love being able to move things really well.
Mhm.
I love just pressing delete, delete, delete. It makes me happy. I love that I can, I'll tell you what I like the most, that I can sit with my eyes closed and just let my hands do the work
Mhm.
and not have to paying attention at all. I can just be like this and be writing with, you know, so that I have a very interior feeling um, as I'm writing without having to move. But let's be clear that there have been a zillion studies that would explore why it's so important to be doing it by hand, and yet I still
Mm.
I still think.
Mm.
All right, well, let's do I think we're at a point where we might each do one more poem and then we'll say
Sure.
goodbye, friends. Thank you for joining us. So, I think I'm going to close with this one about how that pause, the sacred pause, helps to connect not only with the outer world, but we tend to be very invested in the outer world, especially when we're busy. And how pausing helps me really connect with what's more interior. So this is called inner acreage. Inner acreage. There are caves where I can rest without light and radiant meadows with room to expand in every direction. They're not real, of course. Nor is the wasteland, the glorious abyss, which is to say, nothing could be more real than these inner landscapes that always receive me. Whether I'm on a bus or in line at the market or lying in bed before dawn, sometimes I forget the inner world is here. I start believing only in the outer world. How exhausting life is then. But when I remember to live through the gate of intention when I am still, it is as if I'm being breathed and being lived, and I'm out of the way, and then everything is the way. It may not always be pleasant, it's always exactly as it is. There are no words there. But look at me, trying anyway to explain this nothing, to do Look at me trying anyway to explain this nothing to do and nowhere to go and nothing to experience, which is everything. I am like a traveler trying to take a dozen photos to represent a whole country, only to discover that all my photos are blank. I'm like a child in a fairy tale, trying to leave a trail to get back, only to have all the crumbs disappear.
Oh. Well, I'll read this poem. I just wrote this in the past couple of days. This is a poem written for the poet Andrea Gibson, who recently just passed away, and includes a few quotes from Andrea, and I'll include those in the aftercare that we send to you all as well. But this is called "In the Good Light." I find you again at sunset tonight while clearing a fallen sugar maple from the driveway, moving branch after leafed out branch, wondering what made the tree collapse without a breath of wind or storm to push it. I hear your voice when I slip off time's handcuffs and pick wild raspberries, letting each one fall into my palm, drop into my mouth. Something wise guides me toward the ripest ones as I remember what you said about the moment. how it can last longer than a decade. And if we're lucky, we will spend our whole lives praying for what we already have.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, it's so beautifully honoring of Andrea. Thank you. And a beautiful way to end. Praying for what we already have. The sacred pause, always available.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you, Rosemary. Thank you to everyone who has spent this evening with us. It's been a gift.
Thanks, everyone. We'll send you the recording. We'll send you all the poems we shared.
Take good care, everyone.